Welcome everyone to the Employer Handbook Zoom office hour. Today is Friday, end of the week. It is April 9th. It's been a fast week. We are here talking today about AAPI discrimination and what businesses can do to address it. And we're also going to talk about the power of the mentor-mentee relationship, especially during COVID-19 and how important it's been and it will continue to be. And I have an excellent guest today. I'm so honored to have Meyling Ortiz. May, I'll let you introduce yourself, but the two cars in the background of her virtual background may give it away. But May, how you doing today? Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. Yes, you got to stay on brand. My name is May Ortiz. I am Managing Counsel of Employment and Labor at Toyota Motor North America. That's where we make and sell the cars. We also have TRD when we talk about racing. So that's that's me as well. And then of course we have a different company that actually finances the cars. That's not me.
All right. Are we giving away a car today to one lucky attendee? Is that?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could get that, right?
All right. I tried, guys. I tried. Maybe we can send you a nice fancy brochure.
Right.
I think that's probably the best we can do today.
Yeah.
Also, what we're not going to do today, folks, as per usual, is we're not going to give legal advice. May's a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. We're not your lawyers, although every once in a while I see clients trickle into these things. For the next hour, I'm not even your lawyer for the next hour. We're just considering all your questions, which you can put down in the chat box. It's down there. Use the chat feature. We consider all your questions to be hypothetical ones that you're asking for a friend. So when we answer them, we're certainly not giving legal advice. We're certainly not creating any attorney-client privilege. If you want real legal advice, call your lawyer. You know? He or she would love to bill a 0.1 or a 0.2 to whatever question you have. Just do that. And we'll answer your hypothetical ones, okay? The focus today, as I said earlier, is going to be on two topics. First, we're going to start out addressing the rise in AAPI discrimination during COVID-19, and then we're going to get into the mentor-mentee relationship. So let's talk about the first subject. And the big question, this is when I was talking to May before today, we were kind of working up an outline. I asked May for some talking points. And one of the things that May put back at me was, is AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander animus, on the rise during COVID-19, or is it just getting more attention? So what do we think? Is it on the rise, or is it just getting more attention now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not, anyone steeped in the studies, but I think both. I think it has been on the rise, particularly, with the pandemic, being called the China virus, the Wuhan flu, things like that. Clearly making Asian and Asian Americans a target, like a face of the flu, if you will. So I think that certainly has increased the animus. Much like, I hate to say it, but historically, like when, September 11th came around, we saw our, Muslim friends get targeted, or anyone that was brown skinned, Muslim or not, get targeted, right? Like sometimes it's easy to blame a group for something like that. So yeah, so I do definitely think it's on the rise. But also, like, there's a part of it which, I would never profess to speak on behalf of, Asian Americans everywhere, but maybe people just kept quiet about it. I mean, maybe as a group, we have not protested as much, or, just brought a lot of visibility to it. I think in some ways, if someone, caused me a chink, okay, and I move on, right? Like so I think maybe people just also don't talk about it.
Yeah, it's, I don't know the answer to that question either. I wonder if some of it has to do with kind of the media news cycle. For a long time in the employment space, it was Me Too, right?
Right.
And that's not to say that other forms of discrimination weren't important and we're not there, or that employers shouldn't be addressing them, but Me Too grabbed the headlines, right? Then during, there was a look at Hispanic discrimination with Build the Wall, stuff like that.
Right.
We had Black Lives Matter, especially with what's going on in Minnesota, and what's going on with other notable higher profile deaths in the African American community, being a lightning rod for Black Lives Matter and attention towards discrimination against African Americans. And then, right, with COVID-19, I don't want to say it's kind of Asian Americans' turn to be above the fold, but I don't know, it feels like it's media driven to a certain point, and also social media driven to a certain point. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree, that it is, I mean, just think about visibility, right? There's so much news, there's so many things going on, and we ourselves we get focused on whatever's kind of presented to us, So I think you're right. I think social media is a big part of it. And then if you've seen, kind of on the positive, like bringing awareness to it side, I think, communities have used social media to try to rise up and raise up visibility in regular media. I don't know what you call it, big media, regular media, I don't know. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a way of using kind of like social media at your fingertips to really bring awareness, to say, hey, y'all, this is going on. Maybe not in your community, but this is going on, and it's something we should fix.
I'm going to jump a little bit ahead in our outline here, because I was doing some research for this last night, and there was a concept which was unfamiliar to me, and it's intersectionality. And it's this idea that experiences that one particular protected class, or bad experiences, I should say, that one particular racism, discrimination, that one particular protected class endures, there is an overlap, an intersection with the discrimination that another protected class may face. And I'm wondering how that plays into addressing AAPI discrimination here. How you think that may factor in, and then I guess the second part of that is how businesses can leverage that to be a role model and keep workplaces discrimination free without giving short shrift to any one particular protected class.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna have to ask you to say, like, tell me what your second question again
Sure.
is.
It was a big wind up.
But to your first question, I think intersectionality, studies show, and again, I say that broadly. I've been trying to be more educated about this space myself, but it meaning racism or discrimination or animus affects communities differently. So even like if we say Asian American, like that's a big group. And I think part of the problem is that we group everyone together when Asian Americans, it's, so many ethnic groups, and not necessarily all, like stereotypically think, like Asian doctors. No, there are Burmese immigrants who are, statistically usually at the poverty line if we look at Asian American groups. So number one, it's not monolithic, right? So I think number one, that's like a big hump that I even get over, right? A lot of times people talk about Asian Americans, people picture East Asians and Southeast Asians, but not South Asians, which is like another word for like India, right? So okay, so that aside, just looking at the AAPI hate, it's affected Asian American women differently than Asian American men, right? So that intersectionality, it has affected those who are elderly differently, because the hate has been really focused on them being very, very vulnerable. So that's where intersectionality really plays. And aside from AAPI, I know that people look at that even with, Black Lives Matters, #MeToo, like, we can help women, but there's a different way of really helping African American women. Or we can really try to address this AAPI hate, but we have to recognize that it is showing up differently for specifically Asian American women, right? And then I think to your second question, what do we do about
But
it?
yeah, let me see if I can truncate that here.
Yeah.
Our audience today is largely HR professionals. I see some lawyers here too. So this can go for them as well, advising clients. But we all have limited bandwidth, right?
Yes.
And you just rattled off maybe 5 or 6 different subcategories within the AAPI community and how they may be affected differently based on what's going on right now. How does a business who wants to maintain civility in the workplace, but also promote diversity and inclusion, how do they get their hands around all of that, right? And basically have a positive workplace, which can bring all this to bear?
Yeah. I think, especially when when I work with, HR, I think we talk a lot often that we just unpack a lot, like take off the labels, take off everything. Fundamentally, our team members, that's what we call them at Toyota, or our employees, people first, right? And if you have a people first culture, a lot of the solutions kind of flow naturally from that, right? Like everyone wants to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be acknowledged. They want to feel valued as just a human being, right? Irrespective of how much output they do or how successful they are or how productive they are. Human beings first. So that's kind of my mindset. And from that, if there's something going on, whether it's Black Lives Matters or #MeToo or this recent, anti-Asian hate, you gotta talk about it, right? Like I know within Toyota, we've had, listening sessions, whether it was Black Lives Matters or, we've had a couple of listening sessions. We've had one in the one planning for this anti-Asian American hate. And what I mean by listening sessions is like you have leadership, for your company, you decide who the right leadership is, but it has to come from the top. It has to say, company, we care about you and we care that this is affecting you. And we also recognize that you can't just leave stuff at the door, right? I think I've seen a big shift in just work. Like before it was like, leave your opinions, your thoughts, just come in, make your widgets, and clock out and leave. And that's not the workforce anymore. Now we understand that if there's stress out there, it affects what we do in here, right? And so I think first and foremost, having an opportunity to have listening sessions where people can talk about it and talk about, and really that's how we as a company will learn, right? How people are being affected. I mean, through one of our listening sessions, we had a team member say, like, I have to travel for work and and his opinion, his narrative, his personal story was like, I travel through very segregated places in the South. I don't feel safe. I don't know if I'm going to go pick up dinner and then someone's going to punch me in the face. And then if we don't have those listening sessions, how would we as a company know that people are really freaked out about it, right? So I think first and foremost, having opportunity to talk. And then from these listening sessions, I also learned that when managers, like your first line managers or supervisors, aren't even addressing it, it's like this big elephant in the room. And quite frankly, I know that we can't expect everyone to pay attention to the news cycle, but that lack of acknowledgement, like, hey, May, I don't really know what's going on, but I hear a lot of stuff going on. I just want to check in, see how you're doing. That's it. Like, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to really even know what the news cycle says. Just be aware that there's something going on and checking with employees. I think that's what I've heard the most that employees really, really want. And again, to your point, Eric, like that's regardless of what protected category you are, right? If you have managers who exhibit empathetic leadership and think about people first and just check in beyond the, hey, how's it going? But hey, I heard this going on. I don't know if it's affects you or not, but I did want to check in to see how you're doing,
And I suppose that gets back to the listening sessions you were having earlier and the education, because I can imagine, personally, I might feel this way, right? If I were a manager and I'm dealing with someone, let's say outside of my protected class, and I've noticed that protected class has been targeted recently in the media, politics, in society, whatever. I'd almost watch my words if I'm going to talk to someone about that, because I'm concerned that I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Like, I may be well-intentioned, right? And we're trained in employment law that intent doesn't matter, right? It's all about how it's received. So
I know.
Yeah, but I guess saying, how can I help you? Or What can I do to help? Is everything okay? It's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And gosh, Eric, you hit something like just right on the nose, right? Like so many times we're like, managers are so freaked out about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing that they don't do anything at all. And then maybe as a manager, I feel like, well, gee, I'm in trouble if I do say something and do it wrong. Then I'm in trouble if I don't say anything because I don't, see my team members or my employees. Like, what do I do? And I think perhaps in that space, that's where like HR, and then for the lawyers who, advise HR, maybe that's where you come up with some talking points. Maybe, I don't want to throw the word training because everyone's like, oh, another training, eye roll, right? But like, just, hey, these are some ways you can talk about it. And to your point, Eric, at a very basic level, I care about you as an employee. I don't know if this affects you. So I'm not even presuming that this affects you. But if it does, I want to know how I can support you. Right? Yeah. I mean, that sounds pretty like maybe wouldn't get us in trouble. Maybe, I don't know.
No, I'd feel good about that if I were on the receiving end. I think back to Me Too, and the problem that employers ran into with Me Too is the pendulum shifted all the way to the other end, right? Some men got so skittish of being accused of sexual harassment that you heard stories of men who would exclude women from normal lunches, right? Or certain meetings because they didn't want to be alone in the same room with them and risk having some kind of sexual harassment claim. And lo and behold, what you end up doing, okay, it's not going to be a hostile work environment, but now you're creating a disparate treatment claim for someone who's being left out intentionally because of their gender. So I think it does come down to education. How about businesses engaging with the community and with organizations outside the company to help educate workers? Is that, I mean, it sounds good on paper, but is that something that companies realistically can do?
Like what kind of companies? Are you saying like?
Well, I'm saying any company, whether, large or small, let's say employer generally, as a way to improve the workplace. You have buy-in from the leadership, you have accountability, you have internal education, but does it make sense to go the next step? And we saw recently, I'm sorry that I'm going on a bit of a tangent, a lot of companies speak out about, we do not condone, we are 100% against AAPI hate. It is antithetical to our culture. But the next step would seem to me to be aligning yourself with an organization that literally that is their mission, to stop AAPI hate or other forms of discrimination. Is that something that employers should realistically consider? Or is that, I don't want to say going overboard, but is that almost too much to consume?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, this is going to sound like such a lowly answer, but it depends, right? Mm-hmm. It depends on your company culture and your risk tolerance, and also your consumer and employee base. I think when I think about the shift of companies generally, like now companies are, companies used to be able to be Switzerland, right? They could just like, hey, we just make widgets, we just provide the service, but we don't really have an opinion on anything else. And I think those times are gone, right? I think whether it's customers or whether it's your employees, they expect companies to have core values, right? And to live those core values and not just internally, but to your point, Eric, externally, right? So I know, for example, that this crosses a little bit over to, maybe mentoring, but one of my mentees reached out to me during, after George Floyd's death, and basically said, like, my law firm hasn't said anything. And the staff, who are largely people of color, felt really strongly like this firm does not care about us. They didn't even say a thing about George Floyd's death. They didn't say anything about Black Lives Matters. Like, maybe we shouldn't be here, right? And so as a mentee, she was kind of like, well, what do I do about it? Setting aside what we kind of thought about what to do about it, that's an example of like when companies or law firms, whatever, like when you ignore it, right? Like when you don't say anything, that's saying something, right? Like in other words, you can't be neutral anymore, So to that end, definitely consider that as an employer, but then also carefully consider like your sources, I'll tell you that as a company like Toyota, we are very big on education, right? Like maybe we're not as strong in a certain space, then we are going to reach out to, nonprofits or other organizations to learn, like, what can we do as a company? But definitely, I think generally, like May's opinion, not Toyota's opinion, not anyone, just May's opinion, is that you've got to figure out where you stand and what you can do to help your employees. Like, I'm not saying that the company has to be social justice activist. I'm not saying that, but you do have to think about what your brand is, quite frankly, like who you are as a company and whether you're showing up in that way.
Yeah, and that starts at the top, right? I mean, as much as we on this Zoom and the folks who are attending here could put their thumbs on the scale and try and move that along, it really, that has to come from the top. And that gets into, and I want to segue shortly into the mentor-mentee relationships. I think that's really important to piggyback on what we're talking about here. But the EEOC and some of its guidance, folks, if you go and Google it, and I'll put a link up in the chat at some point. Google EEOC COVID-19 guidance, and you'll see the EEOC's what you need to know about COVID-19. It's a big resource document. Unfortunately, it hasn't been updated in a while, since December, and I think they're overdue for updating it. But there are sections about vaccinations. There are sections about the questions you can ask employees and accommodations and things like that. But there's also a section on just straight up discrimination. And within that section, there is a discussion on specifically Asian Americans. And what you'll see is a link to a 2016 task force report that goes well beyond just discrimination against one particular race or religion or national origin. It's very general, but there are some good tips in there, just general tips about raising awareness in the workplace, dealing with incidents of discrimination, preaching accountability, creating a culture from the top. So I would encourage folks in their, after this is over, if you haven't read that task force report, or if it's been a while since you've familiarized yourself with the COVID-19 guidance from the EEOC, check it out. I mean, it's worthwhile. It's a good read. I should also mention, before we segue into the mentor-mentee relationship, a couple of federal resolutions and pending legislation. There's Grace Meng from New York in February instituted a resolution to denounce AAPI hate in connection with COVID-19 that was introduced in the House. And then Congresswoman Meng and Senator Hirono from Hawaii also introduced in March the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. I think it's still just pending legislation. It hasn't gone. If it's gone beyond committee, I'd be surprised. I don't think it has. I can drop links to those as well in the chat. And May, are you okay if I drop links to your contact information in the chat before I forget? You've got a great blog, yeah. and you've got a great. Can people connect with you on LinkedIn? All good?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Okay.
And before we move in this project, I mean, from this topic, I just want to say, like, just generally, when you think about what you can do from a company standpoint, my humble opinion is that you do address it. You think about what fits within your culture, but you've got to, whether it's listening sessions, whether it's a statement from your leadership, however you define that, addressing it. Maybe you really, I don't know if you have, all companies have what you call ERGs, employee resource groups, or at Toyota, we call them business partnering groups. So basically your affinity groups, that's like a great place to be the listening ear of like what employees are feeling and then how to help them, right? How to address, and then bystander training. There is this awesome bystander training that, separate and apart, we created our own bystander training at Toyota, but separate and apart from that, Hollaback, HOLLABACK ! Is a nonprofit that offers like free bystander training with different topics, but there was one specifically that I just took, yes, maybe the week has run. Maybe this week though, I took it this week on how to be a bystander in this space. And it was really, really good. And I know like HR folks, I know I've taken so much training like y'all have, but this was really good. It like gave specific examples. Like if you see someone getting beat up, you want to think beforehand, like what your plan is, right? And so it doesn't tell you like what the right thing, but it gives you all the options. And so for me, I'm like, if I see someone, I'm going to tell someone to call 911 and I'm going to start recording on the phone because I'm not 5 foot tall, so I can't physically intervene, right? Like, but just knowing, like going through the training and saying, okay, if I see this situation, what am I going to do about it? It'll help you from freezing in the moment because we're human beings, right? So if we see something, we may just freeze. So that was excellent training. So I did that as an individual, but I know they offer that for companies as well. And then from an individual basis, if this is something, you know, that's really you're passionate about or that you just want to learn more, that's what I'm doing. I mean, just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I know all this stuff, right? So I'm literally like learning more about the nonprofits out there. I'm signing on to the resolution for this bill just because it's like one small thing I can do because it makes me feel better than doing nothing, quite frankly. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, in the past 24 hours, I've learned more about this than I've known in the last 24 months.
Right.
I saw something on active bystander training, picking up on what you were talking about, May, where there are 4 prongs to it: interrupt, question, educate, and echo. And we're not talking about hopefully we're not talking about a situation where there's physical violence, but literally someone who makes a racist comment. You stop them, right? And you say, why did you say that? You know, where does that come from? And then it's educating them, and then it's repeating that proper message. Hopefully that can work in certain situations as well. But I think part of it also is forming these relationships, either within the workplace or, as you were talking about earlier, May, you have young lawyers who contact you with issues in their workplace just to discuss. So I want to talk a little bit about the mentor-mentee relationship. It is obviously not unique to lawyers, but we can certainly bring to bear some of our personal experiences. Just setting the table. What is a mentor?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure people have different definitions. I mean, I fall back to, a trusted advisor, right? And so in that way, I wonder if, lawyers wouldn't naturally be mentors, right? We give advice, not in this webinar, all the time. But yeah, like I just really go back to a very simple definition of being a trusted advisor. And this is my why. I think we overcomplicate it. If we make it bigger than what it is, it just becomes more of a barrier to actually doing it, right? If you're a mentor de facto by being someone who's trusted and giving advice to someone else, you're a mentor, right? So whether that's in a one-on-one, someone just wants 30 minutes of your time, or whether that is a long withstanding relationship that transcends over, a few years or a lifetime, all of that, you're a mentor.
And it doesn't have to be anything formal, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's I would call, and I feel like I've done a little bit of this myself through my blog, through LinkedIn. I've had people just reach out to me informally and ask to talk to me about a career choice, or should I join, this is not to give any plugs, should I join SHRM? Should I join some other HR organization? What do you think, Eric? I mean, something informal like that. The power of social media, very, very good for the mentor-mentee relationship, especially during COVID-19.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
How do you mentor? I mean, this is just very broad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's so funny because people are like, May, how do you do it? And again, if the definition is really like just giving advice, you're doing it and not even labeling it as mentoring, right? And then the thing is, so anyway, how? So sometimes it's over text message, right? I mean, for my law students or baby lawyers or young lawyers, maybe it's a text message. I love, again, not a plug for any app, but I love this Marco Polo app because it's like asynchronous. Is that the fancy word? Basically, like they can leave me a video message with a question and then I can video message and answer back. And, I can do it like the kids are playing in the bathtub and I can like pick up and see, okay, what messages I've missed and like just give them, my advice, my opinion. Sometimes I have mentors who want to meet like every other month for like an hour. Some want to meet 30 minutes every month. Of course, with time constraints, those slots are very limited, right? So I feel like I can mentor more easily through text message, through like the Marco Polo app, or through, to your point, social media, So the how is usually, like you said, like someone's going to reach out and be like, hey, Eric, I'm about to make partner, but I've got this great opportunity to go in-house. What do you think? And then, I'm sure you have an opinion, you might ask some questions about like, tell me about it, whatever. But like when someone asks you a question and you answer them and you're helping them, that's mentoring.
What was your catalyst to getting into mentoring? I see it with my children. I have 4 of them. Yeah. I see my oldest, and I don't know if it's age or just his personality, tends to serve as the mentor to the younger 3. So what was your catalyst to getting into mentoring?
Oh my gosh, like I was starting to go in deer headlights mode when you asked me that question because I was like, I don't know. But now that you say that, I'm the oldest of 3. So maybe I've done it all my life of like, no, you do it this way, or or showing or whatever. But I think also like, man, I've just messed up so many times as a young lawyer that like, it would have been nice if someone kind of gave me advice on the front end. But to that point, if I knew I was free to ask, right? I mean, I know people probably have different experiences as being a young lawyer, but I just felt like I was supposed to know things and I couldn't ask questions. So I would just learn the hard way, which is like failing a little bit at a time, right? Or getting a brief and having red all over, red ink all over it or whatever. So I think maybe it's like, if I can make it a little bit easier for someone else, why not?
As an organization, there are certain people who are natural mentors. It sounds like you would be doing this regardless of what was going on at Toyota or wherever you may be employed. It seems like it's in your DNA to be a natural mentor. How do you get buy-in within your organization to have, whether it's a program, a mentor-mentee program, or even just an informal, whether it's mentoring circles, whatever it is, how do you get buy-in, not just from the company, but from the employees to take advantage of this valuable opportunity?
Yeah. In my experience, the young lawyers or the mentees, there doesn't need to be buy-in. They're like, oh, a resource that will help me? I'm in. I think probably there's more, getting more buy-in from those who are the mentors or who are giving of their time. And I think 2 things. One, if we didn't mentor and take the time to teach our young lawyers, just think about how that will affect your ROI at the firm or, our profession generally, right? I mean, in purely self-interest, if you don't teach your young lawyers how to write a brief or how to argue or how to, unpack an issue, you're going to be doing more work because when they give you work product, like you're gonna be like, oh man, I'm gonna have to fix this, right? So from a purely self-interest point, you want to help develop someone so they can help you. And if you are at a firm, right, if you want that person to be your partner one day, that's a self-interest there. You want someone that you can trust to handle your matters, right? But I guess more from an altruistic standpoint, I don't know. I just think all this got here through people helping us in some way, whether formally or informally. So why not? And then the fact of the matter, 2 other things, like if you don't develop, they might just leave, right? Again. And then the last piece is probably, it's not that hard. So why not? I don't know. Maybe that's more altruistic, but I'll tell you, like, I started mentoring in 2006. That's right when I graduated law school. And I started coaching moot court. And this was not why I coached moot court, but my first clients and customers and referrals were from those law students who then graduated and they didn't know any other employment lawyers. Like, that's not why I did it, but that's where my business started forming, by those relationships, you know? So think of it as another way of relationship building.
And for folks, the HR audience who are here today, I mean, I could go on with stories about friends I have in HR. And if folks, if you have a couple of tips that you want to throw up in the chat, please do. But I know friends in HR who, especially as mentees, leveraged relationships, not just within their organization, but also through social media. I mean, I can think of a particular friend of mine who was very new to HR, found someone who was very popular in HR in social media circles, whatever that means, blog, Twitter, LinkedIn, and just reached out to that person. And that person was flattered, and took my friend under her wing and really helped her develop into just a fantastic human resources professional who worked with a startup organization that became very successful. And then eventually my friend went off and has a very successful HR consulting business. So this is by no means unique to the legal setting, but May and I speak from experience that, you know, there are the successes and there are the you know, well-intended mentor-menteeship programs at law firms that don't necessarily work out so well. One I'll finish I'll get off my soapbox and talk about something employment law related that maybe weighs on some people's minds here. Balancing the mentor-mentee confidant relationship in the workplace versus the duty to complain and address complaints of discrimination. How do you sort through that?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So my experience, so May's view of the world is that you can have mentors at your company, and as you should, but you should also have mentors outside the company in case, because maybe, you know, I mean, you wouldn't go to like someone at your company and say, I'm thinking about leaving. Maybe not, depending on, you know, where the role is, right? So I think it's important to have a lot of mentors, more than one, and within your workplace as well as outside. And I will tell you, just from a very practical sense, like I do mentor non-lawyers, even though that's probably the bulk, right? Like mostly it's lawyers that come to me, but I do have a few HR folks that I mentor, as well as just business folks, right? Whether it's procurement or whatever. And I'm pretty, maybe it's the lawyer in me, but I'm pretty clear if like, hey, I want to help you as much as I can. But if it gets to the point where it's like, it's something that I have to report, I have to. And I know that might chill the relationship a little bit, but that doesn't mean I can't help them in other areas. It doesn't mean I don't help them, you know, say, hey, let's work on executive presence today, or let's work with, you know, let's discuss how do we manage up, and maybe we can discuss about how we can make your emails really tight so that executives want to read them or whatever, right? Like we can still do those things, but if it is something more sensitive to, I'm really uncomfortable around this particular manager, I was like, okay, we can talk about it. But then at some point I have to be like, okay, now I can't ever take my lawyer hat off. You know what I mean? So I do think you have to be careful about that.
I got a question sent to me. Someone wants to know how to handle a mentor who may step on the employee supervisor relationship, or a supervisor who may feel left out or threatened by a high level mentor. What do you do with something like that?
Wow. I really think it depends on what the specific situation is. I mean, obviously we're talking about people who are threatened. I think how people feel threatened comes from the lack of communication, right? So sometimes it's really helpful, you know, again, you know, depends on people's personalities, but I'm just a big proponent of like, hey, I'm going to put this out there. If this isn't what it is, that's fine, but I just want to put it out there. And it's usually successful, you know? So in that way, you know, if there's a mentor and the supervisor, again, I know it might be kind of awkward because of the power disparity, but I've taken this person on my wing. I really am interested in developing them, but I just want you to be really clear with you. Again, that's probably from the top leader, that I'm not trying to step on your toes. I'm definitely not usurping, you know, what your duties are or what you need to do. So if you feel like I am, you know, let me know. Now I get it. In real life, probably there you're not going to go, if it's an executive, you're probably not going to do that. But I think it's really incumbent on the executive, because they have the most power in that situation, to be really mindful, you know. But I almost, you know, like a lawyer, Eric, I think you appreciate this, and be like, tell me more. What's the situation? What are the facts? Because I think without knowing that, generally, I think communication is important. And if you do have I don't know if this is formal or informal, but if you have a formal mentoring practice at your company, it's really nice to have those guidelines too, right? So on the front end, saying this is what a mentor's role is, this is not what a mentor is supposed to do on the front end. Informal, it's a little bit harder because you don't want to be, I don't know, seen as chilling a particular, you know, relationship or development opportunity. And if I may, as an employment lawyer, especially if the people are involved are different protected categories.
Well, speaking of protected categories, disabilities, mental health, right? We're in a remote, most of us are in remote working right now. Finding that line between being a good mentor, but then not crossing the line and really delving into someone's mental health issues. How do you navigate that?
Gosh, I mean, I've experienced this, you know, not within the work context, but just with other mentees. And I am not shy about sharing that I have a therapist and I talk to her twice a month. It's something I picked up during the pandemic, and oh my gosh, I wish I did it sooner. Like, why didn't I do it sooner? But so I'm not shy about that. So if someone kind of talks about things like that, you know, I mean, obviously HR, right? We go to our EAP, right? We go to, hey, if you know, for professional, like I'm not a professional, I'm definitely here to, you know, listen and support you, but have you considered maybe utilizing EAP? The first few sessions are free. Just try it out. See if you like it, you know? And then for me personally, I didn't like the people that I got through EAP. So I found someone through a referral, you know, but, you know, my own therapist. But I think that's how you do it, right? Like, I'm here for you. I don't want you to feel rejected, but I also recognize my own limitations and being able to help. So have you considered, right? I try not to, it's another SH word, should all over people, right? I try not to do that. I try to say, have you considered, you know, try to open up possibilities for people.
Right. And it can also be a gateway, to your point, to getting people the help they need, right? Whether it's through we're wearing our HR hats and someone now, we realize that our mentee may need some kind of accommodation in order to perform the essential functions of the job. So you help steer that person to human resources or give them whatever the tools they need to get them to be able to work.
Yeah.
But also you can still hold on to that mentorship role, if nothing more, to say, I'm here for you. I'll be your sounding board. I will, you know, help in any way that I can.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So how about this was popular, I forget whether it was at Cisco or I feel like it was one of the tech companies, the idea of the reverse mentorship. We traditionally think of the old heads mentoring. You know.
True. Yeah.
But what about the other way around, where we have maybe a tech savvy company? I'll stereotype, right?
Yeah.
And the younger folks might be more tech savvy than some of the older employees. How do you work into a reverse mentoring relationship where the younger, literally the younger employee mentors the older employee?
You know, I'll tell you that, I mean, in my experience, it doesn't take a lot of work. And in actuality, that is the sign of a really strong mentoring relationship when both parties, both the mentor and mentee, are learning from one another. A early example is that with my first partner that I worked for, I taught him to text, and he'll tell people, May taught me to text, because I was just like, instead of leaving me like these voicemails, I have to pick up stuff, just text me that if you have a question about where's that file, just text me, you know. And he got faster about it, but he was like, and he even said, May, how do I text faster? And I was like, I don't know how to show you that one, but that's an early example, you know, just giving suggestions as a mentee to your mentor of how to make things better. Who doesn't want their lives made better or easier, right? And And then I'll say like a couple of mentees, like the Instagram. I am very much on LinkedIn, Facebook somewhat, but Instagram. And then now there's this TikTok thing. And me, like, I'm not all about that because it's like, for my head, it's like one more thing I have to learn. But I think it's important to know what it is, right? And so like literally when I'm with a mentoring session with a mentee, to be like, hey, tell me about this Instagram thing, right? And then and your mentee or your, lights up and just, is all excited they can show me something back. So that's like a way of, a tech example of reverse mentoring. But I'll say what I'm really excited about from a company standpoint that I am able to talk about is that at Toyota, we've paired that specifically. We've had someone from our ERG, again, that's our affinity group. So maybe someone from our African American collaborative, mentor and executive, someone that comes from a different culture, right? So for that one, there's someone who's African American mentoring a more senior white guy. I'm just saying, but we're being intentional about that. People, it's voluntary. Certainly, as employment lawyer, Eric, we have to think about what the guardrails around that are. But it's really successful, right? Like, let me share with you part of my culture. So that's and across protected guard. That's not just about race, right? To your point, if someone has a disability, we have that ERG, as well as one for veterans and stuff. But that's another intentional company reverse mentoring program that you could do.
And I think looking at it pragmatically, big picture, something so positive like that, sure, you could have the best company culture in the world and someone is going to raise a claim of discrimination, but don't let that get in the way of setting up all of these other programs, which are intended. And it sounds like actually do have the positive results that you set out to create in the first place. Folks, we have about 10 minutes left. We want to make sure we get to any questions that you may have, whether about mentor-mentee relationship or our first topic, which was where we addressed the rise in AAPI discrimination, what companies can do about it. If you don't have any questions, well, this isn't an hour-long CLE. I mean, we don't have to get the full hour, but May and I can talk for a few more minutes to try and fill some time. And I do have a few more questions on my own. We talked a little bit about getting buy-in for a mentorship program and some of the headwinds that you're inevitably going to face. And we can talk about it in the context of a law firm. I don't think it's unique to a law firm, but since we're both lawyers and we've seen it this way, right? Headwinds, work commitments. I've got to bill 2,000 hours. I don't have time to do a mentor-mentee relationship. Or I've got to develop business, right? Now, May, you had a great experience where your mentor-mentee relationship resulted in business development. Or you have just family, right? Work-life balance. I'd rather than spend the time with a mentee or a mentor, I'd rather just spend that extra half hour or hour a week, a month with my family. How do you overcome that, May, and get buy-in for a mentor-mentee system at your workplace?
Yeah. I think first, like, do what you can, but do something. So if I could, again, May's view of the world, don't do zero. Zero is unacceptable. To me, it's just a part of being a lawyer and who we are in our obligation to a profession. I know that's very pie in the sky, and I get that. You can call me out on that. But I think zero is not okay. But you can do it, whether it is, make it very manageable. Maybe it's 30 minutes a month, right? And whether that's one person you want to invest in, or whether that is, I will do 30-minute coffees with someone. And then also, you're probably doing it already. You don't even know it, right? Like that's a whole, my point about demystifying it. It's really not that deep, boo, to quote one of my favorite Peloton instructors. You're probably already doing it. And if you at least schedule it and make it intentional, like I'm going to do 30 minutes a month, that's better than zero, right? And then maybe that's too much, but maybe the way you mentor, and Eric, I can call you out a little bit. I knew you from LinkedIn, but we never had a conversation. I coach moot court, and you were a guest judge at a moot court competition. And for those HR professionals who don't know what that is, it's like law students practicing being a lawyer. And then you have to have attorneys act as judges and kind of pepper them with questions about whatever legal issue is, right? So this interesting problem was actually about COVID, right? Eric, I don't know that you thought about it, but you being a guest judge, that's mentoring, right? That hour, 2 hours, I don't know how many sessions you judged, that's mentoring. And maybe that's all you can do in a year, but you did it. You know what I mean? Like I think you really have to figure out how it fits in your life, but it's not that hard.
I was red hot on that bench too. I was no Justice Thomas. I mean, I was asking questions, and I see Amy F. St. Luck is here, is one of the participants. She was a moot court judge. I think I saw Michael Shore, another one of my colleagues. He was a moot court judge. So yeah, it is, to your point, May, it's sometimes we just don't even think about it. And what we're doing is we're serving as mentors. And within our firm, I can tell you, I don't even think about it as mentor-mentee, but maybe to a certain extent it is. Going back to remote work, COVID, mental health, I mean, we buddied up with people. It was formal in that the firm helped facilitate that, but ultimately, you were they helped pair you up with someone, whether it was a friend within the firm or someone you didn't really know, and you just checked in with that person from time to time to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Just a very friendly conversation. Didn't even have to be about work. Could be, but it didn't have to. And it was just talking, just making sure that other person was doing all right during what's an otherwise pretty crappy time. So.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. It's really just relationship building. I mean, mentoring is a different form of it, but that's really what it is. And again, I think I also get hung up on the labels, and formal versus informal. But I just read a book. It's called Unapologetically Ambitious by Shelley Archambault, and I love the book. I saw her in a webinar and I had to pick up her book, and she had a great example of how you find mentors. I know we've been talking about like how to be a mentor, but like if you yourself are seeking a mentor, seeking advice, seeking your own professional or personal development, you also want to be a good mentee, right? And then her approach was like, it is very informal. It is, you find someone that you think you can learn something from, and maybe, you send them an email or ask them a question. And it's very much like, hey, Eric, I followed you on LinkedIn. I really am interested in learning more about using LinkedIn. This is what I'm thinking. ABC. What do you think? Right? You make it so easy for that mentor or that person you're seeking advice from to answer your question, right? It hardly will take very much time. Well, I don't know, Eric, you might have a whole webinar on LinkedIn use. I don't know, but maybe you answer the question. And so as the mentee, you take that and then you follow up. That's how you develop a relationship. Then, maybe a couple of months. Hey, Eric, just want to check back in. I followed your advice. I did ABC. C didn't work so well. B and A really worked. Thank you so much for that. I couldn't have done it without you. Do you have advice for maybe next steps or whatever, right? It's, again, easy for Eric to respond. Again, I'm not really trying to invite everyone to inundate your inbox, Eric, but that's how you build a relationship, and that follow-up is key. And then when you get to be really good, that mentor or that person you're asking advice is suddenly invested in your success, and they want you to succeed, right? And so I think informal is really the way to build mentoring relationships. I mean, other than the formal ones set by organizations, I've never gone to someone and be like, hey, will you be my mentor? Check yes or no. I mean, it's not like that, right?
Do you like me or do you like me? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. On that awkward note, let's start to wrap it up. May, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to plug? You want to plug your YouTube channel, your blog? How can people get in touch with you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I mean, I do have a blog. It's called themaybe.com, THE, May is MEYBE.com. That's where I kind of blog about mentoring. I blog about professional development. And it's just a personal blog. So, and I put tips in there. My YouTube channel is the same. Right now it's focused on mentoring, like how to be a mentor, where to find a mentor. I'm just starting it. It's kind of like a passion project. But
I
if
was
you have
looking through
ideas or
your
questions,
videos.
I would love it.
I
Yeah.
was looking through some of your videos last night. The production value is really high quality. I'm
Oh my God.
embarrassed at how crappy my videos are. Not this one, this would be great. But some of the videos I upload to YouTube, I mean, they're awful.
Well, let me tell you, one of my mentees, he saw my first video and he was like, no, girl, we got to make this better. And I was like, I don't know how. And he's like, just send it to me. And he's in private practice. He's really busy, right? So I was like, I really can't impose on you for free. Like, he's like, let me just, he's like, I like doing it. And I'll do it for you. That's a power of mentoring. Like, he just offered to like make these videos for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a good note to close on. Thank you, May. Thank you, everyone, for showing out today. I took a poll on the blog the other day about whether we want to do a follow-up session on the new COBRA guidance from the Department of Labor. Maybe we called it beverages and benefits. That was a resounding yes. So I don't know if that's going to be next week or the week after. I'm also lining up. One of my colleagues had a tremendous victory yesterday for Winn-Dixie in a Title III ADA case.
Oh, I want to hear that.
Yeah, down in the 11th Circuit. And I'd love to bring her on to talk about website accessibility and some of the issues that companies are facing in the ADA context. I think that would be really valuable for this audience. So if you have any ideas for future Zooms, let me know either in the chat, email me. Otherwise, thank you everyone for showing up, and stay safe as always, and have a great weekend. Thanks. Bye.